The first ever qualifying session for Extreme E, and it was Lewis Hamilton's X44 squad who led the proceedings from the start. Sebastian Loeb away from the line, the 9-time World Rally champion with Dakar Rally experience as well, but he was committed throughout. One mistake over the top of this dune, he gets a bad bounce, drops the car off to the right hand side, has to use all the four-wheel drive and both those electric motors to drag himself back onto the course. His teammate Cristina Gutierrez taking over, fantastic time from them, great benchmark for everybody else to beat. This man was the first to try Jenson Button. He's done some off-road racing, but not as much as some of the other competitors in this series. A good lap for Jenson, and then a change over to Michaela Arlin-Kodlinski. Down the big drop, everything was going pretty well for the pairing until, unfortunately, Arlin-Kodlinski took a bad bounce here. The car shut down. She had a reset. You could see the disappointment from the team. She made the finish, but they'd lost an extra 40 seconds at a standstill on course. Andretti United, Timmy Hansen, the 2019 FIA World Rallycross champion, fully committed on his run. He was matching Loeb second for second and then changed over to his teammate Katie Munnings. Munnings, though, had picked up a puncture on the rear right and did a fantastic job hanging onto the car all the way to the finish. Watch this. She gets fully sideways both ways just before the finish line. Again, time lost. The team were disappointed, but actually, as they were going to find out when the session played out, there was worse to come for others. Stefan Sarrazin, hugely experienced driver in everything from F1 to WEC and rallying, had this issue as he crossed the road at the bottom of the hill. Gets a little bit too sideways, over to the right, and an enormous roll. Heavy damage to the car. Jamie Chadwick knew immediately that she wouldn't be taking over at the changeover. Let's have another look at that from the outside. Car gets too sideways, clips the front right. He's so unlucky because the second impact it digs in and the car rolls multiple times, lands back on its wheels. Here's the onboard and he braces. Watch this, sanding through the windows. Huge crash for Sarrazin. A lot of work for Veloce to do if they're going to get that car back out this afternoon. Carlos Sainz, El Matador, off the start line for Acciona. 3 times a winner of the Dakar Rally, twice a World Rally champion. The Spaniard really knows how to send a big four-wheel drive, and that was the best road crossing we saw all day. Big two-wheel jump, handed over to his teammate Laia Sanz. She comes from the motorbike side, still quick, but not quite as quick as Loeb and Gutierrez. 28 seconds the gap between them. On to RXR, Nico Rosberg looking on to his driver Johan Kristoff, 3 times and current FIA World Rallycross champion. But it was his teammate Molly Taylor who had this massive moment. The two of them pushing incredibly hard through both laps. And that meant when they came round to the finish, finally Loeb and Gutierrez were knocked off the top spot, just 4.5 seconds between them. Matthias Ekstrom on his outlap with Claudia Hurtgen to follow. This is Ekstrom up at the top of the hill before the big drop, a jump, and then on the throttle all the way down the hill. Ekstrom's time was very close to that of the front runners. He then handed over to Claudia Hurtgen, but unfortunately Hurtgen suffered this massive crash. Car dug in and rolled multiple times. You'll be glad to know that Hurtgen was back in the paddock just 10 minutes later and completely unharmed. Great car builds by Spark Racing Technology. The Odyssey 21, strong enough to take a hell of a battering. Again, a huge amount of work for the team to do if they're to make it out for qualifying in the afternoon. Hurtgen, though, unhurt. Just 2 cars left to run. It was Hispano-Suiza Excite Energy, and they were the first team to send the female driver out first. Cristina Ciampoli-Zonca taking the wheel, putting in an impressive first lap. She then handed over to Ollie Bennett. Unfortunately, one of them had been speeding in the driver's switch zone, and they were given a massive 75-second penalty, which would drop them down the order. The final car in Q1 was that of Chip Ganassi Racing. Carl Leduc at the wheel. Carl had a big crash yesterday in shakedown and was on a big push today to make up the time. He, though, had broken power steering. They fixed it at the midpoint of the race, but it broke again. Sarah Price had to wrestle the car all the way to the finish. And again, it was Lewis Hamilton's X44 squad that would lead the cars away from the grid. In the afternoon, though, the drivers had to run in the reverse order that they'd run from the morning. So where Loeb had led the pairing out in the morning, it was Cristina Gutierrez who was to lead the pairing out in the afternoon. Track conditions had changed a lot from the morning. They were sitting in P2 overall. It seemed that the tactic was not maximum attack, but to make sure they consolidated on the position they were already in. Gutierrez, another fine showing on the split time. She really was going quickly. The sand ever changing. Down the far end of the course, this was the long left-hander before heading into the driver switch zone. It was an efficient switch for the pair. Sebastian Loeb in and away, and onto his lap. The Frenchman looking as unflustered as ever. There were no mistakes this time. Remember, in the run in the morning, he just run slightly off the side of the sand dune and dropped a few seconds. Full commitment this time, and that is the benchmark for everybody else. Loeb heading back to the paddock as away from the line, Michaela Arlin-Kotlinski. Now, in the morning, of course, the JBXE squad had suffered a 30-second stoppage out on the course. Michaela had managed to reset the car and get it going again, but it had been very costly indeed in terms of time. Thanks to others, they weren't completely at the bottom of the leaderboard. Of course, we'd had two big rolls in the morning session, but there was a mistake coming into the switch zone. So Arlin-Kotlinski, this is it towards the end of the run, had set a great time here on the first lap, coming into change with Jenson Button, locked up all the wheels, and unfortunately she then comes over the entrance into the switch zone and is on the gas. And you can see they're clearly over the pit lane speed limit, and they were given an absolutely massive penalty of 2 minutes 55. Some of that was for speeding, some of it was for leaving the switch zone half a second early. They have to be at a standstill for 45 seconds. They went half a second early, and for that they got a 25-second penalty plus the half second. Harsh, but those are the rules. The drivers know it, and unfortunately this time it's Button and Arlin-Kotlinski who are on the receiving end. So despite the clean run, they were to drop down the leaderboard due to that penalty. Button looking more at home on the loose. Could be a threat tomorrow. Katie Munnings heading out for Andretti United. Katie had a yellow flag on one of her runs during shakedown yesterday, and then a puncture this morning, the right rear disintegrating, and a bit of a hero drive for the young British driver to get the Andretti United machine to the flag. They'd been disappointed, but thanks to the mistakes by other drivers, they were still in the running. Katie Munnings passing the point there where Stefan Sarazan had the big roll in the morning, and in fact Veloce announcing that the roll cage was damaged and they would take no further part this weekend. Meanwhile, Timmy Hansen climbing into the cockpit and chasing down the time in front. Now, at this point, he was chasing Jenson
15 seconds, 15 seconds.
Kotlinski's time, and in fact, they were separated at the end of the run by just 0.02 of a second. Very close indeed, but once the penalty had been applied to Button, they dropped further down the order. So it was about whether or not Hansen and Munnings were going to make the top three or have to enter into the crazy race. Laia Sands, the motorcycle rider turned car racer, teammate to Carlos Sainz, the Dakar legend, WRC champion. Sands, though, doing her part of the job perfectly before handing over to the Matador. She said in an interview afterwards she was still struggling slightly with the change from motorcycles to cars. She's been up driving on the ice in Sweden, frozen lakes, for a bit of practice. Certainly not looking out of practice on this run. She was nicely committed, and again, could be a threat tomorrow. Definitely in the running for a top three position at the end of the day. You can see coming into the switch zone, there's in a very long straight exit. Carlos Sainz.
Sorry, is the large part of the focus making sure you finish?
The boost in power. Look at Sainz. Doesn't really look like he needs a boost. He'll get one over this crest. Full commitment from the Spaniard. Bit of air and down the hill away. Looking absolutely fantastic, despite being, I think, 58 years old. Cannot count out Carlos Sainz. Brilliant drive by him. Master of the dunes. That Dakar experience coming into its own here in Saudi Arabia. Strong time for the two who are sitting in third place coming into this second qualifying session. Consolidating that position here. Molly Taylor and Johan Kristoffersen were the fastest in the first session for RXR Rosberg Extreme Racing. Nico Rosberg, the team boss, is here this weekend watching them compete. Hand-selected his drivers, got in touch with them himself. Molly Taylor actually thought it was someone pranking her when they said it was Rosberg trying to get in touch. It wasn't. It was Nico asking her to drive, and it was a masterful decision because she was fully committed in qualifying one this morning. The two of them very tidy on the second run. Unfortunately, they also made a mistake in the switch zone, speeding, and despite Kristoffersen absolutely flying on the second half of the run, Taylor had been perfect on the first half of the run. Come the end of the session, as they crossed the line, they were given the news by the race director that they were going to have a 60-second penalty for speeding in the switch zone. So they would have taken the top qualifier spot away from Loeb and Gutierrez. 4.5 seconds, I think, the margin in the morning, a little bit more in the afternoon, but a 60-second penalty drops them down to P3 at the end of the day. On to the final car of Q2, the final car, because Chip Ganassi Racing didn't manage to get their car back out. They'd had power steering issues in Q1 this morning. Despite the car being right in the pre-grid and ready to go, it never made the start. So Bennett, second in the car, because this team was the only one to run the female driver, Gianpolizonka, first of all this morning. Swapping over, Ollie jumping out, Christina jumping in. Another good drive by her, no problems for either of these two. Thanks to a few issues from the others and consistency and speed, they're going to make it up into a P5 at the end of the day. Great performance for Hispano Suiza Excite Energy on board here. Through one of those sandy dips, certain parts of the track really starting to cut up, and that's only going to get trickier as the weekend goes on. At the end of the day then, we have our top 9 from qualifying. The bottom 3 will go into the shootout for position 7, 8 and 9. The middle 3, 4, 5 and 6, Hansen, Munnings, Bennett, Gianpolizonka, Button and Arlen Kotlinski. One of those 3 will go through to the final, whereas 2 of the top 3 from the semi-final will make it through to see if they can win the event. Loeb, Gutierrez, Sainz and Sands, Christopherson and Taylor to do battle for places in the all-important final for the first ever round of Extreme E.